Is our Ireland South MEP Cynthia Ní Foracu. Cynthia, good morning to you. How's things on this Monday morning?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on.
No problem at all, Cynthia, and good morning to you too. Tell me, look, Micheál Martin is on most of the front pages today. Obviously, his leadership and his communication have been under scrutiny, let's just say, over the past 2 weeks. You, in particular, calling his communication style defective. Do you want to tell us more about why you made that comment or how you came to that assessment?
Yes, certainly. And I'll be very brief because I think it's time for us to move on now. If there's going to be a leadership heave, let's have one and let's get on with it. Otherwise, there's far too many serious problems facing people who are sitting in tractors, in shops, teachers, banks, you name it. Everybody who's working in this country is facing problems. It's called the cost of living crisis. It's also called the fuel crisis and the heating crisis. So the reason why I called it defective was that in the height of the protests, at a very, very difficult time, not only for the people who are peacefully protesting, I'm not referring to the people who are blockading ports and strategic infrastructure. I'm talking about the people who are democratically entitled to protest peacefully. And they were trying to do that, and they were trying to engage with An Taoiseach, with public reps. And in the middle of all of that, I'm talking about at some stage in the middle of the week of the protests, unfortunately, the language used by the Taoiseach, which were words to the effect of national sabotage in the context of those blockading ports, and also words to the effect the government's hands are tied with regards to the assistance that they could give, the financial assistance in this crisis to those most dependent on diesel, i.e. those driving heavy trucks and articulated trucks and so forth, and contractors and bringing food for supermarket shelves, etc. That type of language is incorrect at that particular time. Yes, of course, we want a Taoiseach who was very decisive in his language, and whilst Micheál Martin was decisive, and he's always a good, strong, decisive leader, and certainly displays a backbone, we also need empathetic language, and that's what was missing at the time of this crisis. So that's why I said his communication, his words, his actual words were defective, and then his communication performance with his backbenchers was also defective because they, unfortunately, the likes of Ryan O'Mara, our dear colleague there in Tipp, also James O'Connor in East Cork, and Albert Dolan, I highlight them because they are the three young TDs that signed a joint letter between the three of them to Micheál Martin and essentially called him out. But I think they and all the others who were on the sidelines with the peaceful protesters who were fighting for their lives, they were getting no communications from the government. Call it the government, call it the cabinet, call it the ministers, call it the communications experts that are around those people I've referenced, and of course around An Taoiseach. They just weren't getting any communication with regards to potential solutions. And also, as I understand it, from speaking with my colleagues, although messages and communications were being sent by TDs around the country up the line to the government, it only seemed to be going in one way, and those TDs weren't sure where it landed, how it landed, and they got no feedback.
Yeah, well, I was out covering the protests during the week, Cynthia, and I was there when Micheál Martin made his national sabotage comments, well, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you, but the reaction on the ground from the protesters absolutely inflamed them. And I know from, for example, on the Gardaí's part, their view was that they didn't do them any favours in trying to communicate with the protesters and keep things on a calm basis. I suppose, look, was there an issue that he was conflating the blockades with the protesters, or did he have a point that they were shutting down the government in a way that was not peaceful protest?
Yes, I think unfortunately there was conflation, there was muddling. I've heard the Minister of the Arts describing his communication in relation to launching a review of Ion Commission Imam with regard to how the media reported as he made hymns of it. He described it as that on the News at One, I believe, last Friday. And I suppose in this instance, I would say Taoiseach and anybody around him advising that utterances such as that be uttered on, as you say, the national airwaves at that particular time when people were already knee-deep on the side of the road in muck and in grime and in, sandwiches and probably cold at night time and sleeping in the cab of a tractor. Like, none of this None of this, they didn't want to be doing it. They were put to the pin of their collar. And unfortunately, we all knew that in advance of the protest. So as I said on a different radio station, on Holy Thursday, I sat in the Banner Plaza in County Clare, which had just been opened that day officially by Darragh O'Brien, the Minister for the Environment and so forth. And afterwards, a meeting had been arranged. This is obviously, 5 days in advance of the protest, with contractors. And we met with them. When I say we, there was Minister Tilly Dooley, there was Cynthia as an MEP, coming in with a European perspective and going back with this message to Europe on the following Monday, which I did because the Monday wasn't a bank holiday in Europe, so I was back there. And there was also Colin Crowe, Teachtadála from Clare, and there was also a number of councillors, Fine Gael included. So we were listening, we were actively listening, and we knew the task we had to do. We met with the chair of the IFA in Clare, we met with the contractors whom he brought in and others, and we brought the message back. But unfortunately, the communications piece fell down.